She's editor of Labour List and joins us live from Liverpool at Labour Party conference. Very good morning to you, Emma.
Good morning.
Thank
you
so much for joining us from a relatively quiet corridor, unusually, at the conference. We're told this is a big keynote speech. Is this another one of his resetting his leadership, another one of his, telling the people what he stands for? Because I haven't got a clue what he stands for or what this government wants to do.
Well, I think that's what needs to come out of today. There needs to be a story, not just of what the government has done, which they've done quite a lot, but they are not telling a clear, coherent story of what that means and what that means for the future. So there needs to be a vision. There needs to be, this is what the country will look like once we have done the things that we're putting through Parliament, rather than simply just the business of government. They need to have a story of government.
Well, again, I mean, the thing is, what is the story of government? What have they done? Because the thing that most voters are most aware of, according to all the polls, is the winter fuel allowance being cut for 10 million pensioners and then backtracking on it, being forced by Labour backbench to backtrack. I think also national insurance hike for employers and a load of people losing their jobs. I mean, is that a story worth telling?
Well, there's plenty worth telling. There's a lot of legislation that is really exciting, both to Labour members and very popular in the country.
Tell us
you're
the
right.
Story.
Well, for example, bringing the railways back into public ownership, very, very publicly popular and, of course, incredibly popular with Labour members. Things like GB Energy, building 1.5 million new homes, and a lot of those being for social housing. All of these things are popular, and they're popular with Labour members. They're that sweet spot that they can craft a narrative from.
Okay.
But you're right that what they didn't do, particularly with things like winter fuel, was actually build that into the much bigger narrative. It sort of came out of nowhere, and so it didn't fit, and it jarred, and that's why it made such an impact. Because,
and it impacted
nobody
the people,
was really expecting it.
Yeah, it impacted the people that Labour claimed they cared about. I mean, you say railways back into public ownership. Yeah, that's a very popular policy. Most people don't get the train from one year to the next. I mean, not just they don't get it to work, they don't get a train most years. I still haven't worked out, and no one's been able to tell me what it is that GB Energy actually does. And they say they're going to build 1.5 million homes. They're already behind on that target. Yes, there's a lot of rejigging and changing of the planning rules, and I'm all in favour of that. Always been very clear that's a good move. But no one actually thinks they're going to build 1.5 million new homes. We haven't got the builders or indeed the concrete to do it, interestingly. So when you say that's part of the narrative, I'm not sure any of those three things actually touches the size of what voters care about.
Well, they will be judged on delivery on all of these things. If getting a train becomes more popular, which it should,
why would it become more popular?
And I get them very regularly.
Yeah, I know, but it's a middle-class
obsession.
No, it's a southern middle-class obsession, the trains. Most people in this country don't get on a train
really
at all.
If you talk to anyone from who has to deal with Northern Rail or anyone trying to get from east to west in this country
but it's
by
an
rail,
obsession. The middle class is in the south.
It's not a southern middle-class obsession at all.
Most people in this country don't get a train from one year to the next. 80% of people in this country drive to work.
They do, and actually it would be much better if more people had reliable, available, clean, quick, fast and good trains, and that's what I mean when I talk about it'd be great if the trains were better and more of us were moving out of our cars and moving on to them.
But, yeah, OK, most people don't live on a direct train route to their workplace, and bringing them back into public ownership won't make a blind bit of difference to that. Look, the things people care about, they care about the economy, they do care about the NHS. We've got this announcement on sort of virtual national NHS appointments. I mean, that sounds good. Take another 2 years if it happens. But we've also got the issue on migrants. Now, one of the things Keir Starmer seems to be hinting at in the speech is that the need, got to get tough on the migrant issue, not just smashing the gangs. Singularly failing to do that so far. We're 40% plus up on the year before in terms of the number of migrants who've crossed here. We've only managed to do an exchange programme with about 6 of them so far with France. And dealing with legal migrants, he decries a policy that acknowledged by reformers racist and immoral on Sunday. And on Monday, his own Home Secretary, Shahbaz Mahmood, announced pretty much the same policy, except it didn't apply retrospectively, which apparently means it's not immoral and racist. I mean, it's not a coherent strategy, is it?
I mean, there are think the difference between the reform plan and what Shabana Mahmood has set out, I mean, partly you're absolutely right, the retrospective thing just seems weird and cruel, but there is a real issue with migration, and I think Labour have been too squeamish about saying that for a long time. We need to be conscientious about protecting our borders and making sure that the people who apply to be here legally are able to apply to be here legally in a way that works, and those who are not able to be here legally are removed. And I think it's not a racist thing to say that, and I don't think it's either an anti-Labour thing to say that. And Labour needs to make sure that they are taking that message, but making sure that when they say that, they are then saying, but those who are here legally, who come to our country, who are entitled to asylum, are properly looked after and assimilated so that they can contribute to this society. And that's the more Labour message.
OK, well, that is the more Labour message. But you said here the real issue, there is a real issue on migration, and the Labour's been too squeamish to talk about it. Look, obviously you're not representing the Labour Party as such or the government. I understand that. You're speaking as as editor of Labour List. But the reality is, actually, the Labour Party, and certainly the Labour leadership, has not recognised there's a problem with migration, legal or illegal, particularly legal, vast, mass immigration. Anyone who, people like me from 2000 onwards, who said, I'm not sure this is a good idea, we were decried as racist, been called far right by lots of Labour people. Your side has been telling us that they're a massive economic boon to the country, and anyone who thinks differently doesn't like brown people, even when it's white people who are immigrants from Eastern Europe, for goodness sake. So it's not that Labour's been squeamish about saying it or doing anything. Labour didn't even acknowledge it was a problem and told off the people who said it was and called them far right and racist. That's not being squeamish. That's just, you had your heads in the sand for a long time.
Look, Labour have a long history of being an internationalist party. Sometimes that's come with not recognising some of the issues around migration. That is certainly true of the past, but I think anyone, and certainly some of the people on the left of the Labour Party who are upset at some of the rhetoric that has been used by the current leadership, would tell you that that's not where Labour is right now. And that, I think what's important is what Labour's doing now. And I think there has been a focus on the immigration issue since Labour's been in power. It's going to take time. There was a huge asylum backlog that they inherited, and getting that system working, and not just working in a way that deals with the backlog, but working in a way that deals with everything that needs to be done around issues like making sure that we're housing people in a way that is acceptable both to those human beings, but also to the communities that find them people living in their midst. Making sure that we are assimilating people, making sure that people are learning English.
How do you do that? I mean, how do you do that? If people arrive, and we've seen the figures, and yes, it happened under the Tories, not under Labour, but we basically had, was it 1.6 million more people arrive in this country, largely actually from the Indian subcontinent, Nigeria as well, but just arriving in this country. How on earth do you assimilate that many people arriving in 1 or 2 years?
Well, I mean, as you say, that was something that's happened over the previous government. I think what you need to do is make sure that there are conditions that make people feel welcome, but also make people feel like they have a responsibility to the country that they're living in. I think we all have a responsibility to our country, and some of those things are important, like, for example, putting the English requirements on. Okay. Some people get, again, squeamish about that. I'm not one of them, not least because it's actually really important to make sure that we build community, and one of the key things that communities can do is communicate with each other.
Well, exactly. If you can't speak to someone, you can't get a job, you can't communicate at the school gate, etc. I mean, again, this is stuff David Cameron was talking about quite some years ago, again, decried by the left over it. But you mentioned earlier, you said, it's interesting, you said that the reform policy, and reform are getting a lot of attention this week at Labour Party conference, very much the focus, in fact, of the Tories as well. But the retrospective aspect of deportations of people who have been here, often even been given, indefinite leave to remain, because they basically arrived here, they've worked here, after 5 years, and then they're entitled to basically apply to stay here for the rest of their lives, bring their family members, go on benefits, they're going to get a pension later on, I mean, all of that. But actually, they're not net contributors to this country. People who've even committed criminal offences being able to stay in this country. You're saying that a retrospective deportation of people like that, you're saying that's weird and cruel. Why is that weird and cruel? If I went to live in another country, whether it was France or Pakistan or Brazil, if I was not a net contributor to that country, if I wasn't working, I was living on benefits or I committed a crime, I would absolutely expect that country to say, off you go, toddle off home.
Well, because of everything we've just been talking about building community.
I don't want to build a community with someone who's arrived from Pakistan, doesn't speak English, commits a crime and doesn't have a job. I don't want to build a community with a Canadian or an Australian who does the same.
Communicate. If we want people to contribute, then we need to make sure that they have the security that allows them to put the effort into doing that.
What do you mean by that?
If we just say, oh well, there's a sword of Damocles hanging over your head. We can change the policy at any time.
Yeah.
The settled status you think you have is going to disappear. What incentive is there then to actually assimilate?
Well, the incentive would be.
Want people to contribute.
No, Emma, the incentive would be to assimilate, to learn good English, to get a job, to work hard, to not rely on the state and not expect that the host nation pays for you.
And then you have your leave to remain removed anyway.
No, but you wouldn't have it. No, but you wouldn't. That's the whole point of the policy. You would No, Nigel Farage's policy was you would reapply, and then you would have to show that you weren't a drain on the economy here, and you were contributing. Why would that be, in your words, weird and cruel?
You're a second-class citizen, even though you...
You're not a citizen. You're a foreigner living in another country.
You're not a citizen. No, that was a poor choice of words on my part.
So
you're second class.
Yes, you don't have the same rights.
You're not allowed to be part of the place where you live. Now, I don't know about you, but being part of
you're
my
not part of it, though, because you're a foreigner.
Same as my neighbours.
No, if I go and live in France, I'm not French. I'm British. I'm a foreigner. I can integrate, I can make a contribution, but I'm not French.
However British you are, you might feel part of that village. You want to contribute, you want to build community. And that's what we're taking.
But nothing would stop you doing.
Wants to take away from people is the ability to build community, to feel part of something.
No, there's nothing in that policy that says that. There's nothing in the policy that says that. On the contrary, it requires and encourages people to do the exact thing you say that they want to do anyway.
It takes something away from people that they feel that they've already earned, that they have got through that contribution
for 5 years, and now I can
if you want to do it going forward, then you're removing the security that allows us to build community, and that security is absolutely at the heart of how people can build their communities and take part in their everyday lives, in their neighbourhoods.
I'm just not quite sure what community people have to offer the local community if they come to this country, barely speak the language, give up work after 5 years and are relying on benefits. I'm not quite sure what contribution.
I can tell you that the neighbours I have are absolutely contributing.
Well,
they're a great community.
So if they
reapplied, WhatsApp group, it's fabulous.
So if they reapplied to leave to stay, they would be able to stay. So what's the problem?
Well, because why are they having to reapply?
Because they're not British.
What a whole load of... If Nigel Farage wants to cut bureaucratic waste, why is he making people do everything twice?
Because after 5 years, someone might no longer be working and contributing.
And why? So why are you having? If you've already got settled leave to remain, you have proved that you've reached the conditions for it. Why are we making people jump through that hoop all over again?
Because the conditions that have been given to people to leave to remain.
You've already got it.
They've been very minimal.
I thought Nigel Farage wanted less government waste.
They've been very, very minimal. Well, because if someone after 5 years is able to not work, claim benefits, be entitled to pensions and all of that, then actually that's an awful lot of extra cost to British taxpayers who may well love having a chat with that person over the garden fence, but may not want to pay taxes.
There's an awful lot of extra cost to British taxpayers of having to go after everybody who's already proved their worth.
They haven't proved their worth.
And living in this country.
Well, listen,
but they've got settled leave to remain. They've got the settled leave to remain.
That doesn't mean they've proved their worth to this country. That doesn't. The bar to get settled leave to remain is you've been here 5 years. It's not a high bar, Emma. It's not a high bar.
Well, I think there is more to it than that, and we both know that.
Not much.
Ultimately,
not much. Listen, I'm going to have to leave it there. I'm so sorry.
You say that. I mean, I think that's...
Emma, I'm so sorry. We are completely out of time. We're way over time, in fact. I'm going to have to leave it there. Please come on again after Labour Party conference. Come in the studio. We can have a proper debate about it. I'd love to be able to talk with you about it. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll have to go to a quick break. Up next, going to talk about those NHS reforms that are announced by the Prime Minister later on today. This is Talk.